Dr. Mashelkar, Prashant, Sushil, Nitin, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a pleasure for me to be here today with you on this occasion. It is quite difficult for me to leave the Tata Trusts at Bombay and move out, especially at this point of time. But my association with Dr. Mashelkar goes back to 2012 when President Pranab Mukherjee had taken over as the 13th President of India and I was his financial advisor. And he was someone who wanted to be known as the education president. And there was a whole lot of emphasis on education and on innovation because we used to have at Rashtrapati Bhavan for each of the years of his 5-year tenure innovation festivals organized in association with the National Innovation Foundation, where Dr. Mashelkar, of course, used to be the key person driving it, along with Dr. Anil Gupta from IIM Ahmedabad. And so when Dr. Mashelkar asked me to come, I cannot say no. It's not possible for me to say no. And that's why I am here today. And I think I was delighted to kind of see the level of innovation that is happening today. And when I heard Rahul's story and what is happening, because it's important for us to keep our connect to the ground, and for a nation which has 1.4 billion people, or 16 to 17% of the world's population, it is very important that our solutions are homegrown and they are cost-effective. And that's where I think the current Prime Minister has been emphasizing that we need to go local in a big way if we are to make any discernible impact on the lives of the millions of people, in fact 1.4 billion people, that we stand to serve. So therefore, it is an honor for me to be here today amongst visionaries, leaders, grassroots champions, actively forging the path for social innovation in India. And a special greeting to Dr. Mashelkar because his pioneering work continues to inspire new generations of innovators and change makers. I understand that the National Conference of Social Innovation is a vital platform that brings together diverse stakeholders, social entrepreneurs, academics, policymakers, and practitioners who are driving impactful, scalable solutions for India's complex social challenges. Indeed, this gathering embodies the very spirit of collaboration that Tata Trusts have championed for over 133 years. The first trust that was set up was 133 years ago in 1892, and that was the J.N. Tata Endowment, which, as Dr. Mashelkar said, he was one of the proud recipients of. Dr. K.R. Narayanan was, Dr. Narlikar was, and so many countless Indians who have gone ahead to pursue higher education in different parts of the globe and have come back in many ways to enrich the Indian social, economic, political, technological system. And therefore, I would begin by quoting Jamsetji Tata, the founder of the Tata Group, who said, and I quote, "In a free enterprise, the community is not just another stakeholder, but the very purpose of its existence," unquote. Jamsetji understood that true progress required investing in human potential, in scientific temper, and in institutions that would outlive any individual. His vision recognized that a nation's greatness is not measured by the wealth it accumulates, but by the opportunities it creates for every citizen to realize their full potential. Building on this foundation, every leader in the Tata Group who followed, and especially the late Mr. Ratan Tata, who I had the privilege of knowing very, very closely and working very, very closely, steered this legacy into proactive strategic philanthropy. His discipline of rigorous planning ensured that every resource delivered meaningful, measurable change. as he said, and I quote, "India is still a developing country, one burdened with enormous inequalities. It is our duty to play whatever role we can to diminish these disparities. We are in it for the satisfaction gained from knowing that we have put our shoulder to the wheel of nation building." Unquote. This ethos of purposeful action continues to guide the work of the Tata Trusts even today and will continue to do so for centuries to come. And if I was to go back in time, I think, in my personal opinion, that there are 3 transformative events that have shaped India as a young nation that it is today, with just about 78 years of independence behind us. The first was in 1947, 15th of August, when we attained independence after almost 200 years of colonial rule. And as I say, the future is always built and anchored in the past. There can be no future without reference to the past, and I will just quote down. I was speaking very recently at the Nobel Prize Dialogues, which the Tata Trusts had hosted for the first time in India, in Bangalore and in Mumbai. And it is the first time that Nobel laureates came into India, and the Nobel Prize outreach reached out to any institution in India to have that. And I mentioned to the audience there, many of whom were very, very young students at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, 1,000 researchers, scholars, PhD students, who would not have known this beginning of how India started. And today, when we say we are the 5th largest economy and we are on our way to being the 4th largest and the 3rd largest, that what was the situation that India was in 15th August 1947, when this nation was born out of partition. And I think, for me, the most soul-stirring speech was what Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, our first Prime Minister, spoke on 15th of August 1947. And I would just take the liberty to quote from that, because to me that was the first transformational moment. Many young people here would not know about it. Long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge, not wholly or in full measure, but very substantially. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. A moment comes, which comes but rarely in history, when we step out from the old to the new, when an age ends and when the soul of a nation long suppressed finds utterance. It is fitting at this solemn moment that we take the pledge of dedication to the service of India and her people and to the still larger cause of humanity. And then he went on to say, the future is not one of ease or resting, but of incessant striving, so that we may fulfill the pledges we have so often taken and the one we shall take today. The service of India means the service of the millions who suffer. It means the ending of poverty, ignorance, and disease, and inequality of opportunity. The ambition of the greatest man of our generation has been to wipe every tear from every eye. That may be beyond us, but as long as there are tears and suffering, so long our work will not be over. And I think these were momentous words which heralded the birth of a new nation. And I think today that it is the North Star which every Indian works on. It is the North Star which every institution strives to deliver. And then when I say there was a second awakening, which was in 1991, when India was almost on the verge of economic collapse. And it took 2 people, Prime Minister Narasimha Rao at that point of time and Finance Minister Manmohan Singh, who, working together, liberalized the Indian economy. We used to have, as Dr. Mashelkar would know, we used to be referred to as a nation with the Hindu rate of growth. 3 to 3.5% per annum. That was where we were stuck after years of socialist planning and very, very rigid controls. And it is this duo which liberated India and gave us consistent rates of growth for more than almost a decade and a half of 8% per annum, which lifted millions out of poverty, which really made India find her confidence and faith and place in the Committee of Nations. And therefore, when today we talk about the next step forward, and as the current Prime Minister has now very, very eloquently and in a very impactful, heartful manner said, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Prayas. And I think that is the next generation when India is, as I said, we are moving from being the 5th largest economy to maybe being the 3rd largest economy. But the question that I would like to frame for all of you here is that, yes, when we have grown economically, it is because of the collective weight of the population that we have, which is 1.4 billion people. And obviously the GDP numbers reflect that size and that weight. But there's another underlying reality there. The reality is that our GDP per capita continues to be very, very low. We are still in the range of $2,000 to $2,500 per capita, while the developed countries in the world are between 60,000 to 70,000 USD per capita. And therefore, if you see that there are 3 Indias today, and this is something as policymakers, as people who want change, as people who are innovators, as people who are social scientists, we need to consider. So there are roughly in this 140 crore Indians today, there are 10 crore Indians who will have per capita incomes which would rival that of, let us say, a Mexico. Then you have another 30 crore Indians who are known as the middle class, and that's where everybody wants to kind of get into the Indian market and tap this aspirational class, and which would have per capita incomes of roughly about an Indonesia. And then you have a mass of 100 crores who have per capita incomes of sub-Saharan Africa. And who then are we solving for? And can you have growth without equity? When I was a young student and I was studying economics, we had what is called the trickle-down theory of growth. That ultimately when growth happens, the benefits of growth will trickle down to every section of the population. And we have seen that that's not happened, and that doesn't happen. And therefore our policies and our actions have to make sure that there is redistribution of wealth and incomes, and that every Indian feels a part of the growth story, because you cannot have uneven growth. If the social fabric has to sustain, then every Indian needs to feel that it is inclusive, all-encompassing growth. And I think that's something for us to consider. And that, to me, is one of the biggest challenges of our times. The second challenge is that we are known as a very young nation. We talk about our demographic dividend. Now, while we have the youngest set of population between the ages of 15 to 64, it is also important to realize that they have to be gainfully employed. And we have to ensure that the fruits of that demographic dividend are not lost in the face of an inability to create the right opportunities, the right jobs, the right skills. And I think that's something, whether it's entrepreneurial, whether it's in terms of upgrading, upskilling, reskilling, creating the right enabling framework, it is something that each Indian needs to look at. And so many a times we say that it is the government's responsibility. And I disagree with that. It is every citizen's responsibility. It is not only the government's responsibility. It is a responsibility of government, it is a responsibility of businesses, it is a responsibility of philanthropies, it is a responsibility of every single person, because this nation belongs not only to the government but to all of us. And while government will lead the way, and government is leading the way, it is for us to step up in whatever manner that we can and think about these hard questions. Because you cannot have solutions unless you ask the hard questions and unless you think the hard way. And that's something I would say that. And the third thing I would say is that it's important for us not to forget that India is a very, very diverse land. For all of us who grew up much earlier, I'm almost going to be 58. Dr. Mashelkar and many others are older than me in this room, and many others are much younger. I think when we grew up, we were taught that there's unity in diversity. And the strength of India lay in its diversity. It is not a one-size-fits-all. We need to respect every culture, every religion, every language, every ethnicity. We need to take everyone along. And that is how we have sustained as a nation. That is what makes us very different from neighboring states around us, which were based on the fundamental principle of theocracy. And India is a very, very different land, and therefore the space for dialogue, for consensus, for inclusivity, that must never be lost. And that again, it's not a question of what's happening in the political system, what's happening in the economic system, because a lot of people say it doesn't concern me. No, it concerns all of us. Because as innovators, can we come together? Can we leave aside the small silos that we kind of tend to be in and collaborate in a wider manner? Can there be industry-academia collaboration? Can there be greater collaboration between different ecosystems? So do not always, my humble request is that do not always kind of pass it on to someone else, to an unknown entity or a broader entity, and say that this is government's job, this is industry's job, No, it's our job. And let's take ownership and responsibility for that. Because if we have to develop our nation, all 1.4 billion have to contribute in whatever way they can. So I think that's one thing I would like to specifically share. And coming to innovation, what do we mean by social innovation? And I would just say that it is defined by the development and deployment of solutions to our greatest social and environmental challenges: climate change, healthcare disparities, gaps in education, and digital inequity. Globally, it is already a powerful movement. More than 10 million social enterprises now employ nearly 200 million people, with half led by women. For India, given our complex and urgent realities, social innovation is not just an opportunity, it is a national imperative. And I think when I look at, Rahul came up with how homegrown solutions, innovative solutions, entrepreneurial spirits can revolutionize healthcare. And that's something we need for our masses. Because I was just having a discussion with Professor Mashelkar, most of the private healthcare industry in India, the documented fact, is being taken over by private equity. And where does that leave the future of healthcare? How do millions of Indians access healthcare, which is, again, something that Sushil talked about in his presentation. Now come to education. I think it is that one thing which enables you to escape your accident of birth. It is the biggest force multiplier, which gives everyone a chance. But then the question before us is, you can only have 20, 25 IITs, you can only have 20, 25 IIMs, you can only have one St. Stephen's, one Sri Ram College of Commerce, one something else. How do you ensure in 1.4 billion people that you give quality access to education, you democratize it? What are the tools that you use? Because it's really giving people a shot, a chance, at escaping, giving them that critical velocity to go out of where they were born into and over which they had no control. And therefore, can we look at solutions which are tailor-made? And it's not, I'm not looking about the cut and paste education tech companies that are there today. No, it's not that. It's a question of how do you purposefully solve for quality education? And how do you make it available at costs which will enable people to take it up? So these are issues that we need to really think of. Climate change, the quality of the air that we breathe, the quality of the water that we drink. How are we thinking about it? And as Dr. Mashelkar said, I think that's where the role of philanthropies and risk capital comes in. And that's where I think we're very proud to be at the Tata Trust, to be riding on the shoulders of giants. Because like Rahul mentioned, I was very touched by that presentation that the Anjani Mashelkar Foundation, Tata Trusts, others who put them on this journey when they needed 40, 45 lakhs. And 40, 45 lakhs may not seem anything to a lot of us. But for an entrepreneur who's gasping for breath, that means a lifeline thrown at him. I was at the Tata Memorial Center. I sit on the governing council along with Professor Mashelkar. The indigenous CAR T cell therapy that has been brought in, it's a collaboration between Tata Memorial Center and IIT Bombay. And the scientists who were, the doctors and the scientists who were part of this endeavor, they used exactly the same words, that at a point of time when this CAR cell therapy, which we were developing in India, we were just about to fail when Tata Trusts came in and gave us the funds required. And that is what philanthropy is supposed to do. That is what, when we talk about risk capital, patient capital, because the banks will not lend at that stage. Venture capital will not come in. And I think, therefore, all of us who are part of the philanthropic sector need to look at these things very, very carefully and define our purpose. And that's the only way we will be able to go forward. So when we talk about every successful innovation, we talk about also a critical question. How do we help promising ideas cross the chasm from laboratory to real-world impact? That's also very important. I refer to industry-academia collaboration, and I think the government is again addressing this by way of many measures. But a key part of this ecosystem, I'm giving an example here, is our support to Social Alpha, which was an institution which we incubated at the Tata Trust, committed to India's green transition, which works across a robust innovation ecosystem through a network of innovation labs, startup incubators, accelerators, seed funds, and market access mechanisms. Through climate action, clean energy, agricultural innovation, health solutions, and capacity building, Social Alpha accelerates innovation. As Mr. Ratan Tata stated, and I quote, "Science and technology innovations have the potential to solve some of the world's most complex social and environmental challenges. However, this requires our innovation ecosystem to integrate with the markets and communities. We also need enablers to support innovators solving difficult problems in climate change and healthcare, two of our most pressing issues." Unquote. And I think, again, as a nation, we need to go back to first principles. What is our expenditure on R&D today? We need to really up the game if India has to capture the technological frontier. Whether it's industry or whether it's overall investment in R&D continues to be very, very low, and this has to go up. I have already said that there has to be also a mindset of excellence. I know we tend to pride ourselves on our culture of jugaad. Now, jugaad cannot substitute for excellence. It's okay. We do think laterally. We do a lot of things which kind of cut down on the established measures, steps, etc. But if you really have to compete with the best in the world, the first thing is that our mindset has to shift from jugaad to excellence. Every single time. It has to be muscle memory. And there cannot be, we talk about so many Indians today, all of us feel very happy about Indian Americans who have gone, settled in America, are probably heading 20 to 30 Fortune 500 companies. And these are all Indians who studied here, did their undergraduate here, went to the United States for higher studies. Now, what is it that makes the difference between them and people who are here? The talent has been the same. The education system has been the same because they've studied here for a large part. So what is the difference? The difference is the enabling framework. The difference is the framework that a particular country has created, which we also need to create. Coming back to my earlier, the ability to ask the hard questions, the ability to encourage students and innovators and social scientists to ask the hard questions. Typically, many of you are teachers at whatever level or in anything, the Indian system always has been, if a student is asking too many questions, sit down. You're wasting the class's time. He's always someone who's asking questions, you know. The question is, it's lovely to ask questions. Either listen to the person and by weight of what you know, try and convince him or to understand his point of view. Because if you don't create those enabling frameworks, if you don't create the capacity for inquiry and questioning and an honest movement forward, our people will always seek to go abroad, get the framework there, and add to the capacities of those countries rather than coming back and adding to the capacity here. And I think that's something in all organizations that we are in, we need to create that spirit. Again, as I said, it can't be that, no, this doesn't, I agree with this, but it's okay, it's somebody else's responsibility. It's not. If you are at the PIC, that culture has to be created. If I'm at the Tata Trusts, that culture has to be created. Whichever organization you have to nurture talent. And if people fail, doesn't matter. It's an investment in future success. As long as the intent was right. As long as the ideology of doing that particular thing was right. I think it's just an investment in their future. So I will just leave you with what, as I said, the equitable, sustainable and prosperous future we all want for India is not something waiting for us passively in the distance. It is being actively built right now through the conversations we will have, the connections we will make, and the commitments we will forge in this very room by all of you. I encourage you to be bold in your thinking, generous in your collaboration, and uncompromising in your commitment to impact. Challenge assumptions. Build unlikely partnerships. Think systematically. Act locally. Dream globally. Because if there is one thing that history has taught us, it is this. Transformative change does not come from isolated efforts or individual brilliance alone. It comes from the collective will of diverse stakeholders united by a common purpose. It comes from gatherings like this and how they are permeated to the outside ecosystem. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma, for your inspiring words. May I please request Dr. Mashelkar now to felicitate our chief guest.